we got part 4 of the coilover install video. I forgot to do an intro of the day of, so I'm doing an intro now while I'm making it. But as you guys will see, we'll be setting up some shocks into our DIY shock dyno. We'll be testing the Viking Crusader shocks as well as the shocks from a C6 Z06 car. I guess they're in a Grand Sport, but it's a C6 Z06 shock, as well as some Ridetech shocks that were in that C6 as well. The Crusader is double adjustable compression and rebound, and the Ridetechs are single adjustable. So first thing we'll show is getting it set up and kind of going through how we test them. Alright, so you can see we've got the shock mounted up. You can see how we're kind of holding it up there on the top. How it's pressed in there in between. Nick, you want to give her a few turns? Show them what we're going to be doing? Mm-hmm. Yeah, just kind of going back and forth like that, going through the rebound and compression curve. So we'll set up a time lapse and get our data. Alright, so we just finished up testing the Ridetech C6 shocks and stock C6 shocks. So we'll go over that data here at the end. And now we're going to move on to the C4 Viking Crusader coilovers. We got to do some modifying to the brackets, but then we'll get it set up. Okay, so here we are after testing all the shocks, and what you're looking at here right now is the shock data from the C6, and this is the OEM front. And the thing we like about this, as you can see, is it's got a, this is a touch screen, it's got a knee for the low speed, and then it goes to the high speed. So when you have, essentially you're looking for your how do I want to explain this? You're looking for your low speed and then a transition into a plateau for your high speed. Essentially, as your high speed progresses through velocity, you're not increasing the pressure or
the force.
Yeah, the force. Because that can, am I right in saying that can kind of unsettle the car?
Well, just transfer more force to the car at that point.
Okay.
So what you're looking for is the steeper curve in the low speed section, which is and then to digress off somewhere between 50 and 100 millimeters per second. So that section, the low speed section, is used to keep the body roll and dive under braking movements under control. So that should be a little steeper. But then anything after, that 100 millimeters a second to 125 millimeters a second or so, that usually is indicative of the wheel hitting a bump. In that case, you want the force to not increase a lot, which would allow the wheel to just move up over the bump and then back down.
Okay, so the wheel's not fighting the bump.
So the wheel's not fighting the bump. It's not transferring the force to the chassis.
Okay.
And then in rebound, you gonna move on to that?
No, you're good. You just keep going.
And then in rebound, similar situation where you want the steeper force curve there in the 50 to 100 millimeter per second range, which this one maybe needs in closer to 150 ish.
Or no, you got 150 there, so it's probably closer to
125 millimeters a second. But so that more force down low allows the rebound, like when the wheel's rebounding, to return to the static point without overshooting too far. Ideally, you'd want it to overshoot a little bit because that just allows the wheel to get back to its point faster with just a little extra, overshoot, which isn't a huge deal, compared to just getting back to it really slow, which is a big deal because then it'll pack up over successive hits when it tries to rebound from that.
Okay.
So when you get a really big hit that compresses the suspension a lot and it starts rebounding, it's gonna be returning at really fast speeds. Right here we're looking at 300 millimeters a second.
Yeah.
But you can see that it is digressing. So within that range, the high speed range there, it's not making a lot more force as it goes faster, which allows it to travel that distance quicker because it's going faster. And then once it starts to slow down, once it gets back to almost static height, then you get into the low speed area where there's a little more force being made for the given speed, and that allows the wheel to slow down a little more so it doesn't overshoot too much.
Okay. And to give you an idea of why we like this, do you want to bring up the C4 dynamic? We don't have the C6 dynamic because we just didn't have all the information. But this is, and you're looking, you can see the rear curve there at the bottom a little bit, but you're mainly looking at the front curve there. And you can kind of see what we're talking about when we're saying, it has a knee. And that's essentially that point where it starts to plateau off. So this is the ideal of what you'd want off the C4 Corvette based off of what we've been able to find either on information on the internet. Talking in my last video, this was kind of going over the roll center height as well as the center of gravity height. And you'll notice the motion ratios there, the shock motion ratio. That's what I was looking for in part 3. So that's how this is being implemented, or is helping us kind of determine what we want for a shock setup. So if you want to pull up the C6 OEM rear.
We were at the front.
Yeah, we're talking about that. I just want to pull up the OEMs first.
Okay. Gotcha.
Are we sure this is the rear? Or the OEM?
Yeah, I think so. Because it's got a knee there. These are just really stiff, though. So the thing is that the shocks are set further inbound compared to the leaf spring in the back.
Yeah.
You need more damping on the shock in order to overcome that leverage difference.
Okay.
So that might be why these are so
your
so
low
stiff.
speed is going out so far into the velocity.
Well, it's because the scales are different.
Never mind. We'll change the scales quick here. Okay. Yeah, that looks a little bit closer to what we were seeing.
Oh, actually, yeah, that looks fine.
Yeah. So you can kind of see the same thing going on where you got a knee down here at the bottom for the rebound, a little bit further out than you would, your knee is probably about there.
It's, yeah, roughly.
For the compression. So again, that's kind of what you're looking for. Obviously, what you want in the shock or where you want the knee in the shock kind of depends on your whole setup. And we didn't have that for the C6, but we figured we'd compare it to the OEM shocks that we had available to us. So now why don't we pull up the Ridetech single adjustables for the C6? The front.
Soft, stiff, medium?
Let's just do soft because okay. I think we already, yeah.
Okay, so these scales are matching right now.
Okay.
So we're good there.
So you can see, well, go back to the OEM front quick. Okay, so there's the big difference you can see on the compression side.
Switch back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that you're only ever going up to that, is it 500 newtons, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, 500 newtons.
So actually in these, the compression forces are a decent bit lower.
This is compression.
Yes, this is compression. Yep. The compression forces are actually a decent bit less.
Well, yeah.
And the thing is, it's kind of hard to tell with the noise, which I think was a loose spot in the dyno at that point, like a loose bolt or something like that. But there isn't much of a knee here, which makes me wonder if this is either just a simple orifice or maybe it just has a high-speed stack that opens really soon. But anyway, you compare it to the OEM ones, and you see here's the 500 line.
Right.
And like that Ridetech one came up from here and then just kind of went over to here.
Yep.
Now, on the rebound side, you see the Ridetech. It never actually has a knee.
Yeah.
So we get all the way up to, 200 millimeters a second, almost 250 millimeters a second, which is somewhere between 8 and 10 inches a second, and it still hasn't need yet, like transition into high speed. So at that point, you get potential amounts of pack up there because it's just staying in that low speed, stiffer damping longer. And since we don't actually know when this knee's off, it might be, it might be right here, it might be like way down here.
Right.
Then it's, I guess, what's the use of having an high-speed stack at that point if it's not being used?
Right. And there's no way that this here is the low-speed stack, almost like reversed.
No, so this is just a low-speed, most likely a bleed orifice.
Okay,
so
that's right.
Which that basically means you're pushing just oil through a hole.
Yep.
Which in this case, these Ridetechs are rebound adjustable, and so it's just a variable-sized hole with a needle valve of some sort.
Yep.
And the thing with orifices is that they flow with little force when you're only moving a small amount of fluid through them, which is why the slope here is pretty shallow. But then as you start to try to push more fluid through them, they kind of, would that be exponentially?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll say exponentially.
Yeah, you get this curve here where the force starts to increase at a faster rate.
Yep.
And then once you get to the point where you're clogging that, or you can't, literally can't force anymore through that hole, then it will keep increasing even more.
Right. And now one of the issues we did have is is it the passenger side? Yeah, front right and rear right. Didn't seem to have pressure in it anymore.
I think that was just the rear right was actually blown.
Okay.
So the rod didn't extend.
Well, let's bring up the rear right here quick. Sorry.
I don't even know if I labeled that one because it was goofy. That's not blown. This one. Well, the thing is, at this time these
are the ones that we had all the issues with.
Yeah,
that's okay. We actually broke our mounts on the dyno.
Yep.
Yeah, never mind. Don't look at this. So, anyways, that's kind of what we were looking for to see, kind of what those shocks were doing on the C6, just to gather some data of what it is, doing in the real world application. Why don't we bring up the C4 dynamic page again?
Sure.
Okay, so this is kind of what, as you can see, these two curves. This is what we were shooting for. You got the front curve. You got your elbow happening at about 80.
It's a knee, actually, but whatever.
Or, yeah, knee happening at about 80, going up to 500 newtons on the compression side. And then on the rebound side at about 75.
That's actually 80 still.
Okay,
so
80.
That's something I can set just so we can kind of see what we would like as a theoretical.
Okay. So that's kind of theoretically what we were looking at, and you're looking at a kind of similar thing with the rear shocks too, correct? If you want to scroll down.
Yep, it's actually the same ratios, the same knee speed. It just ends up being different because the spring rates and the corner weights and the unsprung weights are different in the rear.
Right.
Yep. Which I suppose I could talk a little bit about how we come to the design damping ratios.
Sure.
So, I guess to start off, what we find by taking the motion ratios, the spring rates, and the unsprung weights and the corner weights into account, we can do some math on that and figure out what critically damped is, which is how. Let me see here. The amount of damping you need to bring the wheel back to static, the static point after, like, you have a compression incident or a rebound incident, without overshooting at all. So without bouncing, I guess.
Yeah. If you think of it as an X and Y axis, and your bump is going up the Y axis, avoiding going under the X axis as the Y axis comes down.
Yep. So that gets you to the 100% where it gets back to static as quick as it can without overshooting. Now, what we're looking for is having a little bit of overshoot, just because it allows you to get back into that general vicinity of static quicker.
Right.
So what we're actually looking for, at least on the low speed, is an 80% damping ratio. So with that, you'll end up getting just a touch of overshoot. It'll come back, and it usually won't overshoot a second time because the other side of the stack, low speed, catches that. So then what you determine from there is your knee point, which we got 80 millimeters a second in this case. And that can be anywhere from 20 to 100 millimeters, or not 20, 50 to 100 millimeters a second. And you want that set so that the body roll and dive from braking and turning is underneath that, or make shock speeds that are underneath that speed. And anything over that is going to be most likely a bump of some sort, and you want that to be after the knee so that you're into that digressive point where the force isn't increasing a lot. And then the ratio in that high speed, usually you want to put that, I think we got 15% in this case. That's 15% of critical, which is going to end up being quite a bit faster than even what we had our initial low speed set to at 80%.
Yep.
But that's just another thing to keep the forces from getting out of hand.
Right.
And the more force your shocks produce, the more that it ends up in compression transferring to the chassis, or in rebound causing the shock to pack up because it can't get back to its static resting height quick enough. And if it packs up too much, then if you got a bumpy course or something like that, then it ends up just you get bumped into your bump stops, and that makes your spring rates go all wacky. So you don't want that either.
Okay. So then the reason we went through all this theoretical of what we want to look for is because we wanted to test out the Viking Crusader Shocks for the C4. Do you want to bring up... I start with the rear because we were able to test. both of the rears.
Okay, do you want the autocross rate or setup?
Yeah, you might as well start with that.
This one did have a loose bolt on it again too.
Yeah, I know we did have some movement. We struggled with some issues today on the dyno. But as you can see with this graph, the issue that we're seeing with it is there's no knee.
Kind of like the Ridetechs.
Yep, kind of like the Ridetechs.
And then-
Some of these areas in the beginning aren't too bad. If I remember correctly, I should say on the compression side. Our compression side,
it's actually pretty reasonable.
Right.
It could be a little softer to match that theoretical curve. Which I don't know. Maybe if we had a knee in here, it could. And this could be another one that's just kneeing really early.
Yep.
Like transitioning into high speed really early. It's kind of hard to tell because there's a lot of noise here towards 0 millimeters a second. And then when you come down to the rebound, you get kind of a similar look to those the Ridetechs for the C6 that we covered earlier, in that it kind of has that curve that keeps increasing in steepness as it goes down, which again looks like just a port orifice for your low speed, and then never actually knees off into the high speed area either. I would assume that these shocks probably do have a high speed shim stack in them. It's just so preloaded that we can't spin the dyno quick enough to get enough force on it to open the stacks up and then cause it to start digressing.
All right, so let's bring up the front, because both the rears were pretty consistent. That was the one thing that was, I guess,
soft or
half mast.
It's already open. Yeah, that's okay. Oh yeah, this is getting towards the problem area too.
Yep.
Well, I suppose we can actually change the axis to be the same.
As you can see, having your axis set correctly does matter.
Well, the thing is, my settings for that are good for my SRT shocks.
I know.
I tend to run everything soft, though.
You see a very similar kind of graph as far as compression. It's not going crazy through the roof, and the rebound, you're never even seeing it look like plateau. I mean, at least on the compression side, it's kind of plateauing. I mean, it's still going up, but the slope on it is...
Yeah, this one almost might knee somewhere in this area.
Yeah.
Like we might have actually spun this one. Well, no, this is a front, so it might be a little different on the damping. So yeah, this one might have a knee it almost kind of looks like right in there.
Okay.
And I know if you compare it to one of the Bilsteins off my SRT, this one, I think I have the low speed ports flowing so much that it's kind of hard to tell the knee because it just makes it so smooth, but it ends up being somewhere in this area right here.
And to be clear, this is a Bilstein that you've valved yourself.
Oh yeah, yep. And then same thing in the rebound here. It's got that. The knee is right here-ish or so. Back to this one. Yeah, that's the front one.
So, thing from this is obviously we'll see how it goes. I'm not exactly prepared to tear open into my new shocks yet, at least not until I try them out on the car. It's pretty easy to take them out of the car, so I figure we'll throw them in there and see how it does. But as we were explaining, obviously you kind of want that knee in there when you're getting into that high speed to kind of help facilitate going over some of those bumps. And that's really what we were looking for on the shock testing. But this gives you guys kind of an idea what we're looking for, and if you're interested in doing this thing yourself, what you need to look for and kind of what data you need to grab. So that's it for part 4. I guess next is part 5, so stay tuned for that, and that's when we'll be actually putting the coilovers in the car. Keep the shiny side up.